The massive Zarathi flagship loomed in Earth's orbit like a predatory sea creature, its twisted spires and asymmetrical hull defying human architectural logic. Lieutenant Jason Hale smoothed down his dress uniform for the fifth time in as many minutes, trying to ignore the sweat collecting under his collar as the diplomatic shuttle approached the colossal vessel. "Nervous, Lieutenant?" Captain Alina Frost asked, her steel-gray eyes showing a hint of amusement at his discomfort. "Me, never," Jason replied with his trademark smirk. "Just another day chatting with 8-foot-tall warrior aliens who could decide humanity's fate based on whether they like our handshake." Admiral Bennett leaned forward, his weathered face severe. "This is precisely why I opposed your selection for this mission, Hale. Your irreverence might play well at embassy cocktail parties, but the Zarathi value decorum above all else." Jason straightened his posture. "With respect, Admiral, my irreverence has diffused more diplomatic powder kegs than I can count. Not everyone responds to starched formality." "The Zarathi do," Bennett growled. "Remember the protocols, no direct eye contact with royalty, no physical contact, and for God's sake, watch your mouth." The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder. Jason took a deep breath as the airlock cycled open, revealing two towering Zarathi royal guards, their scaled skin gleaming like polished obsidian beneath ceremonial armor. The delegation was escorted through vaulted corridors that seemed designed to make humans feel insignificant. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung alongside viewport windows showing the blue-green jewel of Earth below. Jason committed every detail to memory, not just for his report, but because few humans had ever been permitted this deep into a Zarathi vessel. They entered the grand audience chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a crystalline throne. The human delegation looked absurdly small against the scale of the room, exactly as intended, Jason suspected. A resonant tone echoed through the chamber, and every Zarathi present dropped to one knee. "All rise for Her Supreme Majesty, Queen Zalera the Unyielding, Sovereign of the Seventh Sun, Conqueror of the Void, Supreme Commander of the Zarathi Armada," announced a herald. Jason felt his breath catch as she entered. Queen Zalera stood nearly 9 feet tall, her movements precise and predatory. Unlike the dark scales of her guards, her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between deep purple and midnight blue as she moved. A crown of what appeared to be crystallized energy framed her elegantly elongated head. Despite her alien features, there was something undeniably regal, even beautiful, about her presence. Her six-fingered hands gestured gracefully as she took her throne, and her large, faceted eyes surveyed the human delegation with ancient intelligence. Admiral Bennett stepped forward, bowing precisely to protocol depth. "Your Majesty, we bring greetings from Earth's united governance. We are honored by your willingness to discuss terms of peaceful coexistence." Queen Zalara's voice was unexpectedly melodious. "The Zarathi acknowledge Earth's emerging potential. Your species' resilience has earned this opportunity." The formal introductions began. When Jason's turn came, he stepped forward, desperate to avoid any cultural missteps despite his pounding heart. "Lieutenant Jason Hale, diplomatic liaison at your service," he said with a practiced bow. The Queen's gaze fell upon him with unsettling intensity. Something in her predatory stare triggered Jason's defense mechanism, humor. As he straightened from his bow, a nervous half-smile crept across his face, and before he could stop himself, he murmured, "Well, aren't you a sight, my love?" The words barely carried beyond his lips, but in the perfect acoustics of the chamber, they rang out like thunder. Every Zarathi froze. Admiral Bennett turned pale. Captain Frost closed her eyes in resignation. The Queen's inner eyelids flickered in what Jason could only interpret as surprise. The silence stretched until Jason became certain he'd just sparked an interplanetary incident. Then impossibly, Queen Zalara's scaled lips curved upward. "The declaration is acknowledged and accepted," she announced, her voice echoing through the stunned chamber. "Let the sacred courtship commence." Jason stood paralyzed as Zarathi officials burst into motion around him. Admiral Bennett looked ready to collapse. "Lieutenant," Captain Frost whispered urgently, "what have you done?" "I don't know," Jason replied through a fixed smile, his stomach dropping into free fall. "But I think I just got engaged to an alien queen." "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain yourself, Lieutenant," Admiral Bennett hissed, as the human delegation was escorted to their designated quarters within the Zarathi flagship. Jason ran a hand through his hair, packing the ornate chamber. "It was just a figure of speech, a stupid joke to calm my nerves." "A joke?" Captain Frost looked incredulous. "You just accidentally proposed to the ruler of the most powerful military force in our solar system." Cultural attaché Marcus Donovan cleared his throat. According to my briefing, addressing any Zarathi as my love in a formal setting constitutes a binding declaration of courtship intent. It's considered their most sacred ritual, one that cannot be withdrawn without grave consequences. What kind of consequences? Jason asked, though he already suspected the answer. Trial by combat, Donovan confirmed grimly, against the Queen's champion. Bennett's face flushed dark red. So either Lieutenant Hale pretends to court an alien queen, potentially compromising our entire diplomatic mission, or he fights to the death against a 9-foot war-trained Zarathi warrior. A musical chime interrupted their crisis meeting as the chamber door slid open. A tall, slender Zarathi female entered and bowed gracefully. I am Nexi's Royal Protocol Minister to Her Majesty. The Queen requests Lieutenant Hale's presence for the first accord, the initial courtship ritual. Jason looked desperately at his superiors. Bennett's expression was thunderous, but Frost gave him a subtle nod. Remember, Lieutenant, she whispered, we need this peace treaty, do whatever you must. The first accord proved to be an elaborate dinner with the Queen and her inner court. Jason was seated at Zalara's right hand, a position of great honor, Nexis had explained during their walk through the ship's winding corridors. Queen Zalara wore ceremonial attire that emphasized her powerful physique while revealing more of her iridescent scales. Up close, Jason could see intricate patterns within them, like galaxies suspended in twilight. You appear uncomfortable, Lieutenant, Zalara observed, her multifaceted eyes studying him intently. Are Zarathi courtship customs so different from human traditions? Jason choked slightly on the beverage he'd been sipping, a luminescent blue liquid that tasted like starlight and honey. Forgive me, Your Majesty, on Earth courtships generally begin, less formally. Indeed, a flicker of what might have been amusement passed across her alien features. How do they begin? Usually with conversation, getting to know one another, learning each other's interests. Zalara gestured to their surroundings. Then let us converse, Jason Hale, tell me of Earth's waters, I've heard they cover much of your world's surface. For the next hour, Jason found himself describing Earth's oceans, forests, and deserts to an increasingly fascinated alien queen. Despite his predicament, he couldn't help being drawn in by her genuine curiosity and surprising knowledge of human affairs. You speak with passion about your world, Zalara noted as the meal concluded. The Zarathi value such conviction. And what do you value personally, Your Majesty? Jason asked impulsively. The Queen's head tilted slightly, an unexpected question during a first accord. She paused. I value truth, Lieutenant, even uncomfortable truths. As Jason was escorted back to human quarters, he realized with alarm that he'd actually enjoyed himself. Worse still, he found himself genuinely curious about this alien queen who had somehow turned his diplomatic disaster into something resembling a real connection. How bad was it? Captain Frost asked when he returned. Jason hesitated. Actually, not bad at all. She's intelligent, curious, almost charming in an alien way. Admiral Bennett scowled. Don't get comfortable, Lieutenant. This is still a crisis situation. But as Jason retired to his quarters that night, he wondered if crisis was the right word anymore. The days that followed introduced Jason to increasingly elaborate Zarathi courtship rituals. The second accord involved a ceremonial hunt on a holographic recreation of Zalara's homeworld. The third required him to learn a traditional Zarathi battle poem and recite it before the court. To everyone's surprise, especially his own, Jason approached each challenge with growing enthusiasm. The Queen proved to be a complex individual beneath her imperious exterior. During their mandated courtship hours, she revealed glimpses of wit, wisdom, and vulnerability that captivated him. Your form improves, Zalara commented during their 7th day of courtship as Jason practiced with a ceremonial staff alongside her in the royal training arena. I had a good teacher, he replied, catching his breath. The physical challenges of Zarathi courtship were intense, but he was adapting. You surprise me, Jason Hale, the Queen said, circling him with predatory grace. When you first spoke your declaration, I sensed hesitation in your voice. Jason froze, uncertain how to respond. He decided on honesty. Zarathi customs were new to me then. And now, her faceted eyes caught the light, creating rainbow patterns on her scales. Now I find myself looking forward to each new ritual, he admitted. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her alien features. As do I. Later that evening, Jason joined Captain Frost for their daily debrief. The peace negotiations had been progressing in parallel with his courtship, showing promising developments since the Queen seemed increasingly amenable to human proposals. You realize what's happening, don't you? Frost asked, studying him carefully. What do you mean? You're falling for her, Frost stated flatly. An alien queen from a warrior culture that was considering invading Earth a month ago. Jason started to protest, then stopped. The captain wasn't wrong. Beneath the absurdity of their situation, something genuine had developed, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. Is it that obvious? He finally asked. Only to someone paying attention, Frost replied, her expression softening. Just be careful, Jason. There are factions on both sides that don't want this peace to succeed. Her warning proved prophetic the very next day. As Jason and Zalora walked through the ship's botanical garden, a vast chamber containing specimens from across their empire, a shadow detached itself from behind alien foliage. Jason spotted the movement a second before a blade flashed toward the queen. Without thinking, he shoved Zalora aside, feeling searing pain as the weapon grazed his shoulder instead. Royal guards materialized instantly, subduing the assassin, a Zarathi bearing marks of a traditionalist military faction. Medical personnel rushed to attend Jason's wound as Zalora knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. You placed yourself between danger and me, she stated, touching his blood on her fingertips with evident fascination. Diplomatic instinct, Jason joked through gritted teeth. No, she countered, that was not diplomacy, that was something else. As healers applied regenerative compounds to his wound, Jason realized with startling clarity that he would have made the same choice regardless of politics or peace treaties. Somewhere between ritual and reality, this impossible relationship had become important to him. That night, Zalora visited his recovery chamber, dismissing her guards with a gesture. In Zarathi tradition, she said softly, settling beside his bed, bloodshed in defense of a courtship partner accelerates the sacred timeline. Jason felt his pulse quicken. What does that mean exactly? It means, she replied, her scaled hand finding his, that pretense is no longer necessary, Jason Hale. And before he could respond, the alien queen who had terrified him just weeks ago leaned down and pressed her cool lips against his. News of the assassination attempt and Jason's heroic intervention spread quickly through both human and Zarathi delegations. Admiral Bennett was furious, convinced Jason had compromised his objectivity. Captain Frost seemed concerned but understanding. The Zarathi court watched with fascination as their queen's unusual courtship evolved into something unprecedented. 2 weeks after the botanical garden incident, Jason found himself in traditional Zarathi formal attire preparing for the seventh accord, the final courtship ritual before official bonding ceremonies would begin. The weight of his situation had finally caught up with him. I need to tell her the truth, he confided to Nexes, who had become something of a confidant during his cultural instruction. The protocol minister's expression grew serious. Truth is sacred to the queen, but timing is essential. The traditionalist faction grows stronger daily. Your courtship provides legitimacy to the peace process. That's exactly the problem, Jason insisted. This started as an accident, a diplomatic necessity, but now there are genuine feelings involved, Nexes finished for him, which makes honesty both more important and more dangerous. That evening, as ceremonial fires burned in the vast ritual chamber and courtiers watched expectantly, Jason and Zalora performed the intricate movements of the seventh accord dance. Their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, predator and prey, then partners, then something more intimate. When the ritual concluded, they stood breathless before each other as tradition demanded they speak words of commitment. Zalora, Jason said, breaking protocol by using her name without title. Before we continue, there's something I must tell you. A ripple of surprise moved through the gathered Zarathi. The queen's expression remained neutral, but her eyes focused intensely on his. My initial words, the ones that began this courtship, they weren't intentional, he confessed, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. I spoke without understanding the significance. The court erupted in hisses and murmurs. Royal guards stepped forward, hands on weapons. Admiral Bennett, watching from the human section, closed his eyes in resignation. Zalora raised a hand, silencing the commotion instantly. You claim your declaration was made in ignorance. Her voice was carefully controlled. Yes, Jason admitted, but what began in misunderstanding has become the most genuine thing I've ever experienced. I continued the courtship for diplomatic reasons, but I'm standing here now because I want to be. For several agonizing moments, Zalora said nothing. Then, to the astonishment of all present, she laughed, a musical sound that seemed to lighten the very atmosphere of the room. Jason Hale, she said, her voice carrying the weight of royal decree, I suspected as much from the beginning. It was Jason's turn to be stunned, you knew. Our intelligence on human expressions is quite thorough. The context of your statement made its accidental nature obvious. Her scaled lips curved into a smile. What interested me was not your mistake, but how you would handle its consequences. Before Jason could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. A royal guard rushed forward, bowing hastily. Your Majesty, the flagship's been sabotaged. We've detected explosives in the main propulsion systems. Jason and Zalara exchanged a single look of understanding before racing toward the engineering section, guards and officials scrambling behind them. The peace they had been building, both between their peoples and between themselves, hung in the balance. The engineering deck was chaos when they arrived. Zarathi technicians worked frantically at control panels as warning lights flashed across the massive chamber. Through a reinforced viewport, Jason could see Earth gleaming below, suddenly vulnerable should the flagship systems fail catastrophically. "Status report," Queen Zalara commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. Chief Engineer Tarkus bowed quickly. "Multiple explosive devices, Your Majesty, strategically placed to disable engines and send us into Earth's atmosphere. We've contained 3, but cannot reach the primary device. It's in a maintenance duct too narrow for Zarathi physiology." All eyes turned to Jason. "How long?" he asked. 8 minutes before detonation," Tarkus replied grimly. Without hesitation, Jason stripped off his ceremonial outer garments. "Show me where." Admiral Bennett pushed forward from the human contingent that had followed them. "Lieutenant Hale, you don't have authorization to." "With respect, Admiral," Jason interrupted, "there's no time." Zalara stepped forward, towering over both humans. "He acts with my authority." She turned to Jason, her normally impassive face showing clear concern. "The radiation in those sections is tolerable for Zarathi but dangerous for humans." Jason met her gaze. "Then I'll have to work quickly." Under Tarkus's guidance, Jason crawled into the narrow maintenance duct, following holographic markers projected onto his retina by Zarathi technology. The space grew tighter as he progressed, metal scraping against his shoulders. 3 minutes remaining, came Tarkus's voice through the communication implant. Finally, Jason reached the device, a sophisticated fusion bomb with enough power to cripple the massive flagship. His basic explosive training seemed woefully inadequate as he examined its alien components. "I see it," he reported, "but I don't know how to disarm it." "Describe exactly what you see." Zalara's voice replaced Tarkus's in his ear. Jason detailed the configuration as precisely as possible, feeling seconds slipping away. "There is a sequence," she instructed calmly, "but attempting it incorrectly will trigger immediate detonation." "No pressure then," Jason murmured, sweat dripping into his eyes despite the duct's cooling systems. Following her precise instructions, Jason manipulated the device's control surfaces. His hands shook slightly as radiation warnings flashed on his temporary implant. "1 minute," Tarkus announced. Jason completed the final sequence and held his breath. The device's pulsing core dimmed gradually, then went dark. The journey back through the duct seemed infinitely longer as radiation sickness began to take hold. By the time hands pulled him from the opening, Jason's vision was blurring and his skin burned as though on fire. He glimpsed Zalara's concerned face above him before medical personnel rushed him to the ship's advanced treatment chamber. As consciousness faded, he heard the Queen issuing commands in her native language, harsh, urgent tones that demanded obedience. Jason woke 3 days later in the medical bay. Captain Frost sat beside his bed, relief evident on her face. "Welcome back, hero," she said with a smile. "You've been thoroughly irradiated, treated, and regenerated. How do you feel?" "Like I picked a fight with a black hole," Jason groaned, sitting up cautiously. "The ship, the peace talks." "Both intact thanks to you," Frost replied. "The saboteurs were identified, extremists from both sides working together. Ironically, your dramatic rescue has solidified support for the treaty." "And Zalara?" he asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. The captain's expression turned enigmatic. "She hasn't left the medical bay for more than an hour at a time since they brought you in. There's been quite a crowd of officials trying to conduct business while she held vigil here." Before Jason could respond, the medical bay doors slid open and Queen Zalara entered, her regal bearing somehow softened when her eyes fell on him. "Leave us," she commanded, and even Captain Frost obeyed without question. When they were alone, Zalara approached his bed, towering above him yet somehow less intimidating than when they'd first met. "You risked your life," she stated simply. Jason smiled weakly, seemed like the only option at the time. There is always a choice, she countered, settling gracefully into the chair Frost had vacated. You had already revealed the accidental nature of our courtship. You could have let my people handle the crisis. And missed the chance to impress an alien queen, he joked, then grew serious. I couldn't stand by while both our peoples were in danger. Zalura studied him with her multifaceted eyes. You told me you spoke those first words, my love, without understanding their meaning. I did, Jason admitted. Would you like to know what they truly mean in our language? She asked. The full translation is more nuanced than your diplomats understood. It does not simply indicate courtship, but a specific kind of bond, one between equals who choose each other despite differences, not because of obligations. She leaned closer, her scaled hand finding his. In our oldest traditions, it was used when a ruler found someone who saw beyond their crown to the person beneath. Understanding dawned on Jason. You really did know I was joking from the beginning. I did, she acknowledged. But I also recognized something in you that I had never found among my own kind, someone who might see me as Zalura, not merely as queen. So you, Jason's eyes widened as realization hit. You orchestrated this entire courtship knowing it began as a mistake. I took advantage of a diplomatic opportunity, she admitted with a hint of mischief in her alien features. Our peoples needed common ground, we needed to understand each other. And she paused, vulnerability showing through her regal facade, I needed someone who would speak to me without fear or agenda. Jason laughed softly, wincing at the pain in his healing ribs. So I accidentally flirted with an alien queen, and she deliberately took it seriously. A fair assessment, Zalura agreed, amusement coloring her voice. Though I believe humans have a saying about accidents being destiny in disguise. As formal peace treaties were signed in the following days, gossip spread through both human and Zarathi delegations about the unprecedented relationship between a human diplomat and the alien queen. Some called it a calculated political alliance. Others insisted it was genuine affection transcending species barriers. Admiral Bennett remained skeptical, Captain Frost seemed cautiously supportive, and the Zarathi court gradually accepted what they could not change. But Jason and Zalura, in private moments between diplomatic functions, simply called it what it was. A connection neither had expected but both had chosen, first by accident, then by design, and finally by desire. On the evening before the human delegation was scheduled to return to Earth, Queen Zalura found Jason on the observation deck, staring at his home planet glowing blue and green against the velvet black of space. Having second thoughts, she asked, joining him at the viewport. About the treaty, no, he replied. About us, I'm having about a million thoughts, none of them second. Zalura's scaled hand entwined with his, warm and alien and somehow perfect. Then perhaps it's time to make another declaration, Jason Hale, this time with full understanding of its meaning. Under the light of distant stars, with Earth bearing witness below, Jason smiled at the alien queen who had transformed his diplomatic blunder into the most extraordinary connection of his life. Well, he said, echoing his fateful first words but investing them with newfound sincerity, aren't you a sight, my love? And this time when the queen smiled back, there was no misunderstanding at all.